Welcome to the Be Wealthy podcast, where we bring entrepreneurs the strategies and tactics to grow your business and unlock new opportunities. Once you've achieved success, we'll teach you how to think about your money. Because wealth is about more than just cash flow. It's about freedom. Now our host, Brett Tanner.
Welcome to the Be Wealthy podcast, where we help entrepreneurs increase their income and figure out what to do to maximize their wealth and live epic lives. Today's podcast is with Michael Velasco with Exchangeable. We're going to break down all things 1031 exchange. There's way more than one way to do this to save on taxes and grow your wealth. Buckle up. It is going to be a jam-packed session with lots of info, and you're going to leave knowing exactly how to maximize your 1031 exchange. Let's dig in. So many people think they know everything. I thought I knew a ton about exchanges, only to realize I knew about 7.5% of the total. So I don't want to steal the thunder for today's guest, but I want to give him a warm Be Wealthy intro. He has been in real estate for 20 years. He did me an enormous favor all these years ago, which we'll talk about in a minute. He's had numerous companies in the real estate space. You are what they call an OG. I am so excited, Michael Velasco with Exchangeable, that you are here today. Welcome to Be Wealthy.
It is tremendous to be here. And I know what you're thinking about these headphones is like, is this guy attacking the Death Star? Is he defending the galaxy, or what does he do with it? And I've had a vision quest for the right headphones, and I'm sorry they're ridiculous, but I absolutely love them. Nice talkback feature. They're a little bit much for a podcast, but I know, just don't be jealous of them is what I'm trying to
say. They are a bit much, and I was going to ask you, hey, what time's that Fortnite tournament you're playing ahead, or is it pretty cool? Benny, he's on Fortnite.
Right.
Wildcat 95 is his username, and he loves it. So Mike, you and I met, it was either that cage fighting in Cambodia, or it was at a real estate event about 20 years ago. I think it was the real estate event. And there, you and I met, and so catch us up. You and I were early in the real estate game at that point. Give people, for our listeners, give us a background of what you've been doing, and kind of give us the perspective it'll lead in to today's discussion.
Yeah, it's actually hard to believe. I was thinking about this the other day, how long I've been in real estate, and April of next year will be my 22nd year. Kind of give you an idea. And, my real estate career, I think, started out like a lot of other people's, or like, I just don't like working for people, and I think I'm the smartest guy in the room type thing. And, I'm in my late 20s, and I thought I knew everything. And so I was off going, hey, let me sell a bunch of properties. And then I didn't know this, but we were going to have the greatest economic recession in modern history about the time I started doing real estate. And then so I said, I was broke at the time, and I said, well, I can start doing BPOs for banks, right? Those are $50. So I started doing as many of those as I could. I was doing literally hundreds a month. And I got my first REO account, and I started selling tons of REO, which is basically bank owned, for those of you who don't know or didn't experience the crash. And Brett and I were doing, back in the day, we were doing tons of short sales and foreclosures, because that's where the market was. And what I think I really like about Brett is always one step ahead of the shift. He's always a forward thinker, always moving in the right direction. And so at that time, we were both kind of moving in the right direction, trying to get into that. And that's where Brett and I met, and we hit it off. And I think I helped him a little bit with his REO account in regards to the logistics of running an REO account. And then, so we were, started pumping out hundreds of deals, a year, which was, which wasn't a lot of money, by the way. In 2009, I sold 168 homes. My average purchase price was $90,000. So it's big, big commissions. So that was kind of how I got my start in the real estate space. And then as I started doing more real estate, the longer my career went, I was really worried about creating businesses that I couldn't sell. And so I can't sell a real estate business, really. You can sell a real estate brokerage or property management company, but you can't really sell a business that's just you as the agent. And so
nothing really more than a referral fee, right? The real estate team, that's a good, I love your segue there, is where real estate teams, I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to sell my real estate business. And if you broke down any transaction that's occurred outside of like 3 that I could name in a minute, it's basically sold in a referral fee, right? Hey, Mike, you're going to take over my book of business. I'm going to get a 25% referral, something like that. But not really sell unless you go huge, like a Mark Spain that built a brand, and private equity came in there. And you've got a few of these, what I'm just going to call and these guys are selling thousands of homes a year, right? Yeah. Maybe there. But to your point, in large part, the real estate business itself isn't that sellable. So you started looking for other businesses that you could build that would have intrinsic value.
And highly liquidable too. Things that you could actually sell relatively easy. And so along the year 2017 came along, and I'm like, I think I'm going to start an accounting firm. And Brett was a little bit involved in some bookkeeping stuff. I thought it would be a really good thing to do with a partner as a side business. And so I started an accounting firm, and I was off. And then before I knew it, I didn't have a partner anymore. The partner did not want to be, I was in the business development side. And in the business development side, you really have to know your product, or your service that you're selling, right? Otherwise, you're not good at that. So I had to really know tax and learn tax, not only entity structure, but actual doing tax returns and whatnot. And so I was forced to start hiring people to do that for me, which in any business where you're not running it yourself, the margins go way down. And so if you're hiring CPAs to do the business, CPA business is an amazing business if you run it yourself, high margins, 60% profit margin. And so what I found out about tax was, one, it was a great stepping stone for me to do what I do today. It was such an incredible background for the 1031 exchange. And so we started doing the tax returns with 1031 exchanges. Their form is called an 8824 that you put along with the tax return. And so I was like, well, what's this? And we looked at our first 8824 together, and I was like, what the heck is this? What's a qualified intermediary? Right. So I'm like, we didn't have ChatGPT back then, but I still was doing a little research. I'm like, who is this and what is this? And I knew at that time, being a couple of years in the accounting space, I was like, I think I'm going to sell this, probably here in about 3 more years or so. So after 5 years, I liquidated the accounting firm, and I was off in the year 2000, starting my exchange company. And then from there, I merged the two together. I loved real estate. I had a great background doing real estate transactions. I understand what it's like to be an agent. I had some commercial background. I understood all those things. And that's really where I transitioned. I said, no more accounting firm, no more real active real estate outside of a partner I have that helps run that side. But I just wanted to focus on 1031 exchanges. And here we are today. I'm a certified exchange specialist and got my designation, and I'm happily running a wonderful 1031 exchange company. So,
you know what? Well, first of all, what a cool intro and weave together of your background, right? And I think about the Steve Jobs quote, and he says, it's hard to figure out all the dominoes and steps in your life that are going to make you massively successful, right? We want to figure those out. But he's like, it's actually sometimes you need to go create great experiences. Go get the learning experience of the accounting, get the learning of the BPOs, of all of these things, and you can actually connect the dots by looking backward. Right? Because as you were telling that story, you're kind of like, man, this guy was everywhere. But then you're like, well, actually, there was a really clear line to get to 1031 exchanges looking back. Because the tax portion and all that knowledge, well, that's all. 1031s, how often does tax come up? Well, that's the whole thing you're doing in a 1031 relates to tax. Well, how did the real estate background and the flipping and the commercial and the BPOs and the REO, it actually all gave you're probably the most knowledgeable 1031 guy because you came as a practitioner, then as a tax and as an educator. So now, I'm curious of your take on this. I bet you spend with a client, 70% of your time is probably education, teaching them about these are your options. Is that fair, or am I totally off base?
That's exactly what I do every day. I'm really educating the client on 1031 exchange, because most people, and I would say probably 80% of our client base, has never done a 1031 exchange before. And then we start talking about more exotic exchanges, and I'm just kind of trying to put the puzzle together for what they're actually wanting to do, and giving them the options on whether or not they can exchange or not. And so that's really what I find myself doing on most days is educating, and then letting my team kind of help with the paperwork, but just educating, trying to give a great client experience for our clients. And our clients are typically higher net worth clients. They have had some real estate. The demographics are from like 40 to 80 years old, and they've acquired some assets, some real estate assets, and so they're a sophisticated group. And I have to really exude a lot of confidence when I'm on the phone and give them as much information as I can, so that they feel confident about giving me potentially millions of dollars. Which is important.
So before we get too far in, Mike, I want to go back to a favor you did for me, because I'll never forget it. So I actually, Mike said we were both doing REOs and short sales at the same time, and REO just stands for real estate owned, typically by the bank. I actually wasn't that smart. I was the guy that ran headlong into short sales when no one was getting them done. And so I was actually in the middle of the short sale business, and I was making $0 because I had hundreds of short sale listings and they weren't closing. They were taking 14, 15 months to close. And my business plan, I believe that they were going to take 3 months. So, I was just off only by 5 times. So during that period of time, I had to get creative. So I actually needed to get into what Mike was doing. I needed to get into the real estate owned business. And I showed up at a golf tournament. I don't know if you know how I got the count. I'm going to share it here. And the reason I'm telling this story to our listeners is I think today feels a lot like 2007, in my opinion.
It does.
Things are a little weird. They start to not make sense. Inventory's going up.
Short sales are rising, by the way.
Short sales are coming back. So I go to a golf tournament where the Bank of America rep, with a good friend of ours who you know who it is, the Bank of America rep was going to be golfing. And I was actually in his group. I was in his foursome. So I just showed up to the golf course an hour early.
What are the odds, right? What are the odds?
I show up an hour early and I said, hey, here's $100 if my bag finds its way onto his bag. So in other words, we're on the same golf cart. Because I believe if I can get on a golf cart and, chat someone's ear up for 4.5 hours, if I can't at the end of that make something happen, then I need to go do something else. So at the end of 4.5 hours, I got the account. I was like, oh, I can totally do REOs. I got this thing. It's no problem. Easy game. I know everything. So I get the account, but Mike, I don't know anything at all. I actually know zero. So I got to figure this out. So we have a mutual friend who connected us. We go to lunch, and this guy here I have my staff there, spends an hour and a half showing us everything we need to do to be successful in REOs. And so I'm forever grateful because you helped me make that. I didn't look stupid. We kept the account. We ended up growing those accounts. But it was so helpful that you did that. And the reason I tell that story is 2 parts. Number one, opportunity comes to everybody, but are you ready to take advantage of it, right? It cost $100 to get on the cart, yet that made all the difference. I made millions in commissions from that $100 that I spent. And so I would encourage the listeners, what in your game, where can you go find that opportunity, and how can you capitalize on it in a way that others? And secondly, if you're struggling with something, you're one relationship away from helping you radically change your business. And so early on, you were one of those people for me. It was massively helpful, and I'm forever grateful.
Well, you've returned to 10x. And I think the thing for our audience, especially if those that are, this analysis by paralysis, like go get the business. Brett wasn't worried about servicing the business. He was like, I'll just figure that out. And in life, like you're going to have a lot of moments where you're the imposter. There was times when I was in the accounting firm, I had the imposter syndrome. Same thing when I said that, the 1031 exchange stuff, there was an imposter syndrome for the first year or so. And eventually you figure it out in a way. And so I think a lot of people are really afraid to do something without knowing it all, and I think that's really the danger for most of us, especially who want to be entrepreneurs, that we are just so worried that we need to know everything. And you don't need to know everything, but one thing you got to have is a little bit of guts and a really good mentor. And so what did Brett do? He looked for the guy that was selling a ton of REOs. He goes, I want to take you to lunch. And that's how we met, And so, and the same thing I do today, like I found the best 1031 exchange attorney, and I saw him in the room. He was the smartest guy in the room. We were at a FEA conference. There's 20 attorneys in the room. He's the smartest guy in the room. And I'm like, this guy's the smartest guy in the room. And he's 35 years old. Matthew Rappaport, who's been my counsel for the last 4 years. And I went up to him afterwards. I said, "You're my guy." I didn't ask how much he was. I just said, "You're my dude. You're the smartest guy in the room. And I want you to be my lead outside counsel." And I went and found the best. In the same respect, whatever industry you are in, you have to go find who's doing it at a really, really high level and just have them sit down with you. Most of them will do it for free. Some of them maybe want a consulting fee, and that's okay. Pay the consulting fee because what you'll get out of it is tremendously valuable. And so,
Mike, I run a coaching and training business, right? We help entrepreneurs or people in the real estate space grow their incomes. And so a big part of I spend my day talking to real estate agents and investors. And I coach some of the top people in the country in that space. And one of the things we talk about, Mike, is that there's 3 relationships you need in life. The first is you need a mentor. You mentioned that. You need someone who's already been where you want to go. They've already traveled those roads. And the goal of having that mentor is they can compress time. What might have taken you 10 years, because they can say, "Hey, Mike, don't go down the second and third doors on the right up there. Those doors are tough. Open the third one. Yeah. That door's got the answer," right? So you need that mentor. The second relationship you need is a peer that's at your level that's on the same journey. Mm-hmm. So maybe not their exact in 1031 exchange, but you've got a peer that wants to live a big life. They're making the right decisions, all those things, right? And it's really that coaching relationship comes from peer accountability, right? The mentor comes from they're your coach. Your peer, you're going to coach each other. Like, Mike, you said you're going to do that thing. I'm going to hold you accountable. I said, I'm going to do this thing. You're going to hold me accountable. And then as we meet, we're just kind of coaching each other from a peer perspective. And the third relationship you need someone you're mentoring. You're carrying out that full circle. You're helping someone, like I love mentoring young people in their early 20s, late teens, and really getting them clear on what matters in life, right? Because there's so many wrong roads. There's so many influencers online that are just spewing nonsense. They're just completely fake, right? I know that's crazy on the internet that things aren't real. I always think it'd be fun on a podcast if you had to show actually your tax returns and maybe some of the real estate you own. Wouldn't that be wild? I made a joke once. I was giving a talk at the back of a conference. There was a bunch of influencers back there. And I said, what we should all do is just flip our tax return on the screen before we go up. And then we should all give our presentations. Who will play? And you should have saw the terror, right? The fear of just, right? Because a lot of it's, not real. But I think those 3 relationships, and to your point, getting that mentor is so big. So I'm going to ask you, Mike, who's been a mentor in your life and it could be your estate attorney or your legal attorney, your general counsel for Exchangeable. But when you think back of all the things you've done, who was that mentor and what were the lessons you learned?
Well, 2 that come to mind. I mean, Brett's been a tremendous mentor for me as well.
Present company excluded.
Yeah. There was, when I was discovering the 1031 world, I went and found the one certified exchange specialist in the state. There was only 2 of them at the time. Her name is Sheila Long. She works for Old Republic Exchange. Incredible human being. Refused to take money from me because I wanted her to mentor me. And to this day, we're both CESs. We're both part of the FEA, and we talk probably twice a week, just about the issues that come up in this business. 1031 exchange is about the nuances. And so I spent a lot of time with her, and she's really, I wanted her to come to work for me if I could possibly do it. But she's happy at Old Republic. So she has been one that's been incredible for me. And I reached out to her intentionally to try to help me. And she didn't care about the competition. She didn't care about anything else other than helping me. So she was really, really amazing. The other is a very good friend of mine, Brad Fortune, who I met in 2006. He was a hard money lender, and I was borrowing money on some of the flips from him. And he drove up. I'll never forget it. I was showing him a flip property. He shows up in his white Toyota pickup truck that was 7 years old, and flip-flops, shorts, pops out of the truck. And I'm like, okay, this guy's the hard money lender. And I learned something very valuable that day. And I've learned a lot from him about hard money lending. And I do a little bit of that on the side too, with some of the money that I've made. I lend out just like Brett does, which is great passive income. And
best business ever.
It's so cool. And the guy's probably worth $50 million now. So he would just, on no flash, all cash, no flash, my man. So he was a really great mentor. And he saw a very young, energized person with, and so he looked very favorable upon me because I was such a hustler. And I think he really liked that about me. And so he just kind of poured into me everything that I know about, hard money loans today. Those two were really, really crucial in my development as a business person. And Brad was always one to like watch your spending, like let's get a budget, so he was really, really good. So those are the two that come to mind. There are still really good friends of mine and very close to me.
If you were to go, if we pick Brad or the other one, either way, if you were to say there's a lesson, like the biggest lesson you took away, what do you think that would be?
The lesson, I think, if I look back, and I know you're not asking me to look back, but if I look back and go, hey, what would I do maybe differently, right? And what's the lesson? I think if you're a young real estate agent in the real estate space, go find the best agent in your market and go work for them and be on their team. The challenge with very, very alpha people that think that they're the smartest guy in the room, me, the older I've gotten, the more I realize that's not true. So I just try to get in different rooms. I'm just in the wrong room, right? So that's the advice I give. And that's what the advice this is how I would do it differently. I would go and found the best one. I did that really well with the exchange company, but I didn't do it as good with the accounting firm. I didn't do it with my real estate career. I just kind of figured it out, which was, I don't think, a really good idea. And so, and then, I am not selling masterminds. I'm not in the business of selling mastermind memberships, but being in a room with tremendous high achievers and being in that culture and that ecosystem is absolutely the most important thing you can do for yourself as a young rising entrepreneur. You have to be in those rooms, and I'm in 5 of them for a variety of different reasons. But a lot of it, and the thing that I don't take lightly, is the personal development side of it, and like, how do I get better? How can I grow my net worth? And it's a very humbling experience when you think you've accomplished something pretty good, when you realize that there's like, whoa. Like my mindset needs to shift a little bit, and I need to get better every single day. Even as I turn 50 years old this month, like I have got to get better. And so those are the things that I think, if you're asking me maybe what advice or what I would do differently, those are the things I would do.
So, random question: how much do you think you spent on your own personal education, self-development? Just a ballpark guess, your whole career. What do you think that number is?
My entire career, it's been a lot,
including
more. It's been a lot more lately. I mean, I'm probably $150,000 a year in personal growth. This year will be $150,000.
You're spending $150,000 now. Then if we go back, so it might be $1 million.
I got just in the education and some of the documents needed for doing my exchange company. It was $100,000 in education. Like, why would I go and spend $100,000 with my attorney? Why would I do that? Well, I had to have every single instrument known to man, and I had to learn all of that stuff. Like it's 4 years of an education. I was getting a PhD in 1031 exchanges, but I couldn't do that. Just, I could have went to work for another company and learned it. But, so those are the types of things. I think early in my career, that was the issue, Brad, is I was not investing in my continuing education in regards to my wealth growth. I think I invested in 2010 in Dave Ramsey's program just because I was broke trying to figure out how to make some money and pay my bills. Right.
Right.
So it was on a very small degree, but I think you should set aside a percentage of your gross revenue for educating and getting better. And I think one of the things you said at the our last mastermind, or maybe it was an online hour discussion about what can you go and do to make yourself an extra $100,000? Like in the next few months, you need to figure out and educate yourself. How do I make an extra $100,000 a year? what do I need to do to learn to do that? And so I thought,
the frame was just, what's the idea that you would make you an extra $100,000? And then what are the books you need to read? What is the research around it? Then who's that thought leader, right? And what's that investment? I look back, and so I get this question more than anything else by far. I've got $10,000. What should I do with it? Right? I get that question all the time, and I have the same answer every single time. Find the most relevant thing for you that would drive your income up, and go spend the $10,000 in that. Whether that's books. By the way, and you don't need to spend $10,000. I don't want people on here like, oh my gosh, Mike's spending $150,000. How do I get started? Well, first of all, a public library card I think is largely free, right? A lot of the information that's out there is free. So I love the way you said that. I've had many mentors in my life. 3 come to mind. My dad, Russell Shawn, and Gary Keller. And I'll wrap my 3 lessons up here, which are my dad's lesson. And the voice I do of my dad is Nutty Professor, which you've heard me do. And he's nothing like he's an incredible human. He does not sound like the Nutty Professor, but when that movie came out when I was in high school, and I thought, how funny would it be to tell third-party stories about my dad in the Nutty Professor voice? As everybody says, eat healthy. I'm healthy. So my dad, I'm like, I have this idea, any business or any idea I had growing up, he would go, oh, you should absolutely do it. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. That's literally his saying. Nothing ventured. If you don't do anything, you're not going to gain anything. So his thing was, you're an entrepreneur, try everything. Like, how do you know what's going to work? So that's why I've had like 300 different businesses. That was inspired by that. And so,
and you were getting a PhD throughout the course of those 300 businesses. Brett, everybody looks at Brett now and they go, oh my gosh, what a success. And I feel the same way about him. I'm like, but what people don't see is the 300 businesses, of which 200 fell on you fell on your face on, and you failed miserably, and you failed. Yeah, or more. And people don't see that about Brett Tanner. And I think that's the thing that gets lost in just the, where you are today is what you've been through to get here.
But you got to reframe failure, right? So I think most people are trained that failure is bad, right? It's bad. You shouldn't do it. And it was my third mentor that taught me, Brett, it's just learning, right? You actually aren't failing fast enough. The faster you can fail in something in small ways that aren't, life-changing, but like minor failures just teach you that didn't work and there's another way to do it. My second mentor was Russell Shaw. You go back to 2005, I just got my real estate license. I finished my first year. I go to a presentation. He was up on this stage. He was number 1 in the state. He was a thought leader. He's still to this day, just probably no one sold more real estate as an individual, not these teams that are all combined and stuff today. I bet you in Arizona, probably no one sold more real estate than Russ.
Yeah. Brilliant, man. Brilliant.
Just genius. And so if you're watching this, here's what I would do. Find that person. Mind you, I'm 25 years old when I met him. I didn't really meet him. I'm just in the crowd. And I thought to myself, I got to sit down with that guy. I need an hour of his time. Now, how do I get it? So I sent him a check for $500 to Russell Shaw and said, to the charity of your choice. And I wrote him a letter. I don't even know the story. And I wrote him a letter, sent it FedEx, signature required. And it said, the quote said, the only difference between who we are today and who we are 5 years from now are the books we read and the people we meet. I believe that you would be one of those people. And I gave him my favorite book at the time. My phone rings, and I met FedEx required. Next day, I get a phone call. Brett Tanner, Russell Shaw, I'll meet you at Houston's tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Be there. Don't be late. Click. You got it. Yes, sir. So I show up and he goes, hey, you have 1 hour and we're going to go. So we sit down at the table and I got my little notepad out. I hand him my business, I got my business card, and he goes, good news. Everyone that sits down with me makes more money. So for the rest of your life, Brett, you'll make more money because you're here today. I'm like, let me write that down. Brett will make more money. That's kind of a cool one to start with. And that guy proceeded to coach and train me. It was very much just, I would say limited coaching, more training in the beginning. Write this down. Is this your business card? He's like, it's stupid. It sucks. It's dumb. Get rid of it. Put your picture on it. Back then there was so one of the biggest things he taught me, I was like, I'm not getting enough listings. And he said, it's because you're crappy at it. You're not even good at it at all. I'm like, you hadn't even heard my listing print. Like, I didn't even know. And he goes, because if you were better, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Okay. And his instruction was, I want you to go to 50 presentations where you don't think you'll get the listing. So I was sitting in living rooms with this is, my business, but would apply to any business. Go give 50 presentations where you're going to get the sale. So I'd go into a for sale by owner, which is overpriced by $100,000. And I'm sitting down there giving my presentation. I go, well, what do I do at the end? He goes, who cares? Close your book and walk out the door. You're not even trying to, you're just getting, he goes, you're a comedian getting stage time. Talk about that advice. So I think about when I'm doing something new, I'm just a comedian getting stage time. Like when Chris Rock or one of these incredible comedians goes out, they go to small little comedy places and they're just working out material to build up to we all see the Netflix special, to your point. We don't see the 3,000, 2-minute acts putting that whole thing together. Yeah. And then lastly, I'm blessed and coached by Gary Keller, thought leader. Tell you, it's been one of the honors of my life. And he taught me two things. Taught me like 1,000 things, but there's two big ones that stand out. Number one, no one succeeds alone. It's all about people. Who's in your life, your mentor, your business partners, your employees. No one succeeds alone. And the second one is you fail your way to success.
Yeah.
And those were just massive. So thanks for sharing that. So Mike, I want to jump into 1031 exchanges. I want to set the table stakes here a little bit, which is, my background in real estate. And I believe everyone should figure out how do you optimize your income and your craft? How do you make more money doing the thing you're already doing? Once you become successful, the question becomes, what do I do with that money, right? To maximize my wealth and ultimately live the life that I wanted, right? Money is just the only goal of money should be for you to land at the destination you want it. And so as I was selling real estate, I acquired a bunch of real estate. We had over 100 single-family rentals across the country, and of which I'm actually in the process, I'm down to, by the end of this year, I'll be down to about 20. So I'm selling off all my single-family rentals, and I'm rolling those up into other investments. Triple net commercial, some things that are a diversification, which we'll get to. And so I started doing a tremendous amount of 1031 exchanges. And I was familiar with one type, which is you sell a house, you have 45 days to identify whatever you want to buy, and then you have 180 days to close. Not another 180 from the date of your original purchase. And that's the one we're all used to. Now, anything else you'd add? That's the one that our audience that's in the real estate space, they're all going to get the forward-looking, what I'm going to call 1031 exchange. Is there anything else you would add to that mix there that we need to think about? Or why don't you do the setup for the exchange that we all get, or we all think we get?
Yeah, I'm going to show it. Go ahead and share my screen here if I can. Let's see here. I'm going to share. We're sharing.
Yeah. Let's see if it will share. Maybe.
Sharing. We are sharing.
Oh my God.
Share screen. Yeah, look at that.
Perfect. I love it.
You and I do enough Zooms that we're somewhat familiar with, like sharing screens and stuff. So it could be a train wreck. I don't know, but it's going well so far. So let's
couldn't be better.
Could be better. So the types of exchanges. I think when we think of a delayed forward exchange, that's the most common. And when we, I'm just going to go over here to kind of highlight the one we're doing. Delayed forward exchange is the one you're talking about, Brett, where we're selling the relinquished property first, and then we are acquiring the replacement property. And that's your standard forward exchange is what we call them. The term starter exchange may be something someone uses. You need a qualified intermediary. You have 45 days to identify, 180 days to close. So that's your standard forward exchange. There are two others which I think are going to be very valuable for the audience. The reverse exchange.
Well, let's back up. I want to go back to the other one. So let's talk first. Why does someone do a 1031 exchange? So Mike, I got a house that I bought. I bought it for $200,000 10 years ago. It's now grown to, it's worth $600,000, and I go to sell it, right? So if I sell that, we're just going to make the numbers simple. I've got roughly a $400,000 gain. At long-term capital gains rate, I'm going to have about an $80,000 capital gain, 20%.
Yeah.
Why would I exchange?
Yeah, I think the issues of tax are the problems, right? So we have a long-term capital gains. We have a depreciation recapture on the sale, and we have potential state taxes as well. So we have three taxes that we might have to pay if we sell this asset. And so 1031 exchange is really the IRS's way of saying we can go ahead and trade out to a property of equal or greater value, and not pay long-term capital gains and depreciation recapture. And so that is the reason, and people can keep more of their cash instead of giving it to the government, giving 25, 30% to the government. We can keep it reinvested into another piece of real estate, and do that through a 1031 exchange. So that's, to answer your question, that's why people do it. It's to save on taxes. And
so save on taxes. In the example I gave, it's going to be about $80,000 to your point, plus depreciation recapture. Now, So that's the positive. Who doesn't want to save, $80,000 to $100,000, right? Everyone wants to do that. Now, on a normal exchange, Mike, what's the catch, right? Because it sounds too good to be true. What's the downside to a normal forward-looking 1031 exchange?
well, I think I'm going to go to a different slide here real quick. So this 45-day period, you talk about the downside. So from the sale date, we've got 45 days to identify the replacement property. The replacement property, finding that in the 45-day period is maybe the most difficult thing to do in a 1031 exchange. So the relinquished property sells. During that 45-day period, we've got up to 3 properties to identify. Really, if we're going to do a straightforward exchange where we're going up in value, we're going to identify up to 3 properties. So 45 days is a pretty tight time frame. And so we're going to use the escrow period of the relinquished property along with that 45-day period to identify something we really would want to close on. And so, well, you may be asking the question, well, what happens if I don't close on that property and we're past the 45 days? We can go back to the other 2 properties we identified and perhaps purchase one of those. Now, what if those other 2 have sold and we've canceled on the one that's the problem with forward exchanges. That's the risk, right? Is you are going into this with tight time frames and you can't find a replacement property quickly. And that's the thing.
So you sell your house January 1, right? Let's just put January 1. You've got until roughly February 15th to not only find the 3 properties, but really, we got to get through all the due diligence. You got to know for certain that that's a deal, because to your point, if I identify these 3 houses and I get to the end of that 45 days and for whatever reason all 3 don't work out, I'm toast, right? I mean, now I've eaten the tax. I'm just going to pay the taxes if I'd have sold it traditionally.
Exactly. So what I would tell clients is we want to be through the inspection period by the end of the 45th day. I want you under contract and through inspection period if we could possibly do it. Now, there are some cases where that doesn't happen. I had one last summer that the client had 3 properties identified and they were all under contract. She goes, I'm hoping one of them cancels. I was like, okay, let's go with that strategy. I said, all right, thankfully one of them canceled and we were able to acquire that property. But, for the most part, that's not how it works. Most people they've identified a property, they're through inspection period and we're ready to close. And that happens 95% of the time. It's the outliers that actually where you cancel on the property or something and you can't find another one. Most of the time, the client just goes, you know what? I can't find anything I really like. I'm going to go ahead and we're done with this exchange after the 45th day. And we're going to go ahead and get our money back and move on to the next property or next investment, whatever they want to do.
So my advice to people, Mike, tell me you agree with this. If you're going to do a forward-looking normal exchange, the time to start thinking about the properties you want to buy is honestly 30 days before you're listing your subject property. Like you need to be looking at deals and, maybe you've got 15 deals you're looking at, starting getting that list down where you're basically either writing the contract, like you said, we want to be through everything in that 45 days. Now, the second part of the timeline is very easy, that 180 to close. I think that's pretty, if we're through due diligence, giving yourself, 4.5 months to close is really easy. It's just that getting through that identification is tough.
Yeah, typically it's the only time we run into issues on 180 days is when we have a very large commercial property that requires incredible due diligence, financial look-throughs, phase 1s. Like, as you can imagine, those can get a little bit longer, and those may be 4 months, sometimes 5 months. I had one go, 160 days before we closed it, and we were just, we're just kind of waiting on. And then the financing on those larger deals can be complex. So to your point, though, Brett, like for 99% of transactions, 180 days will be fine. It'll be fine. The next slide I really want to talk about before we get ahead of ourselves as we get more complex with maybe some reverse exchanges and construction improvement exchanges. I want to talk about just the basics first, right? The first that people get thrown up the most is it has to be investment property. You can't 1031 exchange your primary residence or your second home in Pine Top that you're staying in most of the time. Brett's got one himself that he enjoys. He gets out of the Phoenix heat, enjoys himself.
There yesterday.
And so that's not an investment property, right? Unless we turned it into a hybrid rental, perhaps. So it must be an investment property. Any real property for any real property is the next one. And that's not really a slide here, but I think it's important. Any real property for any real property is a good exchange, like-kind exchange. Like-kind just means it's real property. I had a CPA several years ago tell a client that they could not 1031 exchange land for a single family house, which was absolutely couldn't be more wrong. And CPAs, to their credit, the tax code is, 8,000 pages long, right? The Bible's like 2,000 pages. We spent our whole life trying to learn that. Can you imagine trying to be a CPA here running 8,000 pages of code? It's not going to happen. So you really have to know this going in is I can buy any real property, and that can be the form from land to single family to oil royalties to condo, et cetera, et cetera. So there's lots of different options that come with it, but any real property for any real property.
So I want to pause you there. I want to anchor that point in, right? I think that you may, if you're watching this, you may end up going, all right, I tried to do a 1031 and someone told me I couldn't sell my house and go to a commercial building. I couldn't sell my house and go to land. I couldn't sell my house to a natural gas or oil royalty. And, the way that I kind of explain it, Mike, and some of you agree with this, is it's deeded real estate with an investment purpose. Any deeded real estate.
Yes. And an investment purpose is the key, right? Is because land you can't really rent out unless it's industrial and you're parking something on it. So it held for investment purposes. I think you describe it well, Brett. The other thing that kind of where people get confused is like, how long do I have to hold the real property? And this is an interesting one because there's nothing in the code that says I have to hold it for 12 months.
So we were to go out, Mike, and we were to ask 1,000 people, what would they all tell us? You need to hold it? No, 1 year.
1 year. Some people say 2. Some people say 2 years. It's kind of funny because 1 year is long-term capital gains, as we know. It shifts from in your stocks and your real estate. After 12 months, it shifts from ordinary income to long-term capital gains. So 1 year and 1 day is what is suggested by most CPAs and tax attorneys because it doesn't bring out the IRS. They will not scrutinize it as much if it's been a year and 1 day. The other thing, and in this market, that's not really happening, right? We're not getting monster appreciation. If you're in a great market this year, you got 5% appreciation in an amazing market. So that doesn't really apply, but back in 2000, 1 year, your property, went up 60% in 1 year. And so that was more a prudent time to really talk about a 1031 exchange in a short time frame. There is nothing in the code. Back to what's in the code. And the code is kind of very short, the 1031 code. And it's riddled with case law, private letter rulings, and then they'll actually have revenue procedure. And there's really not that many of them. But none of them address the timeframes. And there has been cases where people have sold properties prior to a year and their cases held up. And then there are cases where people have sold before a year and their cases haven't held up. In all the cases where they held up, the client had a clear intention to hold the property as an investment property. It wasn't a flip or something like that. That's where, a lot of my investors, especially the ones that are just good enough to be dangerous, they're like, I'll just 1031 my flip. 1031 is not for developers. It's not for flippers. It's not designed for that. It's held for, tend to hold for long-term investment, really, is what it's about. So 1 year and 1 day is what you should hold the property. It must be the same taxpayer, which is a very complex issue. Just know that a property, if you're selling the property in Brett Tanner's name, Brett Tanner has to buy the property. Whether it's disregarded tax to Brett Tanner's tax return is one thing if he's got a disregarded entity, but it must be the same taxpayer.
And it might be Big Baller LLC, if that's the LLC that's selling the house. Big Baller LLC, it's also buying the next one.
It's buying the next one. And yes, and I don't want this to get lost, is if Big Baller LLC is disregarded for tax purposes and filing the Schedule C on the 1040, you can bounce in and out of that disregarded entity. You can't. But for the most part, if it's regarded like a C Corp, an S Corp, a partnership, it has to be the same taxpayer. So if Brett and I went and bought a property together in an LLC partnership, we'd have to buy and sell in that partnership. And so that's an important thing. We'll get into maybe just a little bit more on entities. You can go up and down in value in regards to the amount of properties. So if you wanted to sell one property in the Bay Area, which I seem to be doing a lot of lately, and going and buying properties in Casa Grande, which is a small sub community that Brett and I adore. You can go and buy 6 properties, sell one in the Bay Area and buy 6 properties in a more affordable property. Or in Brett's case, he goes, I am tired of that, dealing with all of these roofs and doors. I want to get something a little bit more quiet. And I want to go to more of a quiet investment of the triple net lease or triple net lease or, a ground lease or something like that, which is, Brett's kind of concentrating on right now. So you can go up and down in value, making sure that the asset makes sense, and I'm seeing this a lot in markets where the rents are, kind of that 1% rule of rent. They're going to these markets that are very enticing, like a Memphis and a Birmingham, and some of these markets that make sense still cap rate wise, rent wise.
Got it. So you could go, if I'm selling my $1 million, whatever, Bay Area home, and I want to exchange into $400,000 homes for $2 million, totally works.
Totally works. Yeah. The timeframes get a little wonky, but yeah, I mean, it's important for clients to know, hey, if we're going to do that, the time frame for identification starts upon the sale. So we got to have all those identified, and which is maybe more challenging since we're buying 6 properties, right? Or in Brett's case, which the challenge is now I'm trying to sell 5 properties and move it into one exchange. That's where it gets even more. And I don't want to get lost in the weeds here, but it does create more complexities, when you're doing exchanges where you're selling a bunch of them and then going to one,
Totally. And so then you got to use all the funds, right? So the biggest thing I think people miss, Mike, is as I sell, when I close at title's going to send all that money to the Exchangeable, to you, your company. All of my proceeds that normally would have been wired into my checking account are now going to you while we go through that process that we showed on the prior slide. Any of those funds you don't use, you're going to be taxed on. And so you just got to make sure, I think that people sometimes think, I'll take a little bit of the money. You could take some money if you want. You're just going to be taxed on what you take.
Yeah, and that term is boot. If you want to take a little bit of money. So if we're selling $100,000 property, let's use $1 million for easy math. So we're selling $1 million property. We have to buy equal or greater value. So at least $1 million. So let's say I've got 500,000 in proceeds, which a lot of us do in this last real run that we've been on value wise. So we got $500,000 in cash. Well, I'm required to buy equal or greater value. So I got to go find $1 million in real estate. And I have to use this $500,000 to put towards a down on the new property or properties. So all that $500,000. If you said, Brett, you go, I got to have some cash, we can either do a refinance, we can do some other stuff. But if you wanted that $100,000, you're just going to pay taxes on the $100,000. And now your requirement to rebuy is $900,000, right? Because we've gone down. So all of that fund needs to go towards the purchase of the new property. And yes, so as a QI, one of my jobs is to keep the money, keep it safe, bonded and insured, the bank account's in your name. You sign off anytime we wire the funds, those types of things. So it's important when you're using a QI, you're potentially handling a lot of money over to the QI. So you want to make sure that they've got proper bonding, licensing. They're a member of the FEA, preferably a CES if you got one, which is kind of like a CPA for tax accountants. So those are important. The other, and that was really the last part of it there, that for complete deferral, we got to put all the money back into it.
All right, so we've got the regular exchange. It's going to work for some folks that are where it really excels, in my opinion. You've got one asset. You're ideally moving to one other asset that's up in value. You already maybe have access to another property. And here would be an example, Michael. If you had a building that I knew I wanted to buy, you and I are we're not a related third party. We know each other, we're friends. But if you had that building and I'm selling mine, well, we could easily meet that criteria because, hey, I'm going to buy that building from you when mine closes. We'll identify it, we'll close. That would all work out. Where to your point, I was taking 80 houses and trying to move them into 4 big buildings. It's hard to get the 80 time. Mind you, all of those, like the first one I did, I took 21 rentals and moved into this building where AT&T is the anchor. It was very complicated, right? I was lucky that I sold all 21 to one person, so I was able to hit that. And so now let's go show us the next level. So level 1, forward-looking, very easy to understand. Now take us through a reverse exchange.
A reverse exchange and reverse exchange is where we acquire the replacement property first. And people get a little bit, that's confusing. One, if you're just trying to understand exchanges, you're like, wait a second, I'm buying the replacement. Well, how do I do that? I need money from the relinquished property to buy the replacement property, right? And so reverses, there's some reasons why clients would do this. They are typically higher net worth clients. They have access to capital, or they have enough equity in the other property. They can do a line of credit out of the relinquished property to acquire the replacement property. But the reasons why clients do more clients as their portfolio grows, as their net worth grows, they do not mess with forward exchanges. And the specific reasons are the 45-day period. They don't want to get into a bad investment. They're seasoned, crafty investors, and they know, hey, I'm going to wait for the right deal. And that's really the advantage of the reverse 1031 exchange, is you have got time to consider what you're going to buy. And you can strike on a deal that's perfect, right? Especially in a competitive market. These triple net buildings and commercial, those don't just sit on the market. They're usually don't even hit the market. They don't. They just go. CBRE goes to their portfolio of investors, go, hey, we got this one going. Do you want it? Great. Boom, boom, it's sold. And it's just an interesting culture in the commercial realm. But even in the wholesale real estate, think about this, Brett. One of your wholesalers, one of your team goes, hey, we've got one hell of a deal here, right? And Brett goes, I want to buy that. I'm going to 1031 exchange. Well, we don't have time to mess with contingencies, right? So we put the property under contract and we close on it. And we close on it using an EAT LLC. And so I just want to get back to real quick before we get into the logistics. That is really why clients do it. The problem with it is capital. So you have to have access to capital. There are lenders that lend on these types of instruments. And I'll get into it a little bit more here, but I think that's the important thing is you've got to have access to capital when you're doing reverse exchanges. And so when we go ahead.
No, keep going. That's perfect. You're going right where I want to go.
Okay. I think the other thing that we have to understand is when we acquire we do a reverse exchange and acquire the replacement property. The IRS says that you cannot own the replacement property and the relinquished property at the same time. So that's where the QIs come in and act as two roles, really as the QI and also the qualified escrow accommodator, meaning I'm going to take title to the property in this LLC. So we buy the replacement property in what they call an EAT, which is an exchange accommodator title holder. Don't worry about all the acronym. It's an LLC. It's a fancy term for an LLC, single member, where Exchangeable is going to be the owner of the property, right? And so we're going to take the funds, we're going to go under contract, we're going to create an LLC, and we're going to call it Brett Tanner's EAT LLC, and we're going to close on the replacement property. And you're going to bring, let's just say you have cash for simplification reasons. Let's say you have cash. We have $1 million replacement property. We form the LLC. We buy the property in the EAT, and then I'm going to give you as the taxpayer a property management agreement, which in this case we're referring to as a lease, it's really a property management agreement. And what I'm saying is, Brett, you're the property manager on this, right? You have every right to the rent. You have to pay the taxes. You have to, just like you would in a property management company that you hired out of state, handle everything. I don't want anything to do with this. I do the same thing. I'm the holder of the property. and I closed on it. It's in the LLC and Exchangeable owns it. But gosh darn it, Brett, you're the real owner. This is a legal fiction. Like, here's the property management agreement. Like, don't call me when the toilet doesn't work, right? So that's what you do as the property owner, right? And you're able to receive some rent from it. And that's the other kind of good thing about a reverse is you can start receiving rent right away. As in a forward exchange, you may go 60 days without any rent. The capital's out, no rent, right? So a reverse has that kind of benefit as well. And so you as the taxpayer now or the property manager, you're renting it out and you're placing the relinquished property up for sale. And so we list the relinquished property. We eventually sell the relinquished property, which we have 180 days to do in safe harbor. And then it works just like a forward where I sell the relinquished property. I'm going to get funds from that. Let's just say it's $1 million, right? Now we have $1 million. Well, Brett gave me $1 million to buy the replacement property. So the money comes back to me, and then I start working the membership transfer to this LLC over back to Brett. So Brett's going to be the new member manager on the LLC, and that's the way we transfer title, right? It's really the same LLCs on title. The only thing that changes is the member managers, and I'm going to transfer that over to Brett. And then Brett, I'm going to go, you're now the member manager of the LLC. Now I'm going to give you your money back, and here's your $1 million back, and we have a good exchange. And so I don't know if that's clear as mud, but it is the mechanics of how a reverse exchange work.
So the way I think about it, right, if we do a forward-looking exchange, I sell my house, I have 45 days to identify what I want to buy. I have 180 days to close. The reverse, I'm buying what I want to buy first. I've got 45 days now. It's the exact reverse. I got 45 days to identify what on my portfolio I want to sell. And I got 180 days to sell all those to roll into the property that I already own.
Yes.
And during that time, you're the, so everybody, we use this term QI for the qualified exchange intermediary. The tax code calls, if you're doing a 1031 exchange, we've got to use someone like you. We have to, right? That's in order to do, you cannot do a 1031 exchange if you're saying, hey, I don't want to use a QI. I want to hold my own money. Well, then it doesn't work for you. That the government wants separation. They want you to sell something. It goes to a person like Mike who's going to fill out all the paperwork. And by the way, when should you start thinking and discussing this with a QI? About 2 months before or 6 months before you even think about doing any of this, right? I think that you've got to get so early on this. And I thought I was like 30 days before I was starting, on my first ones. Now I'm like, I want to go. The first question in my mind that starts is, you go to your CPA and you say, what's my tax bill when I sell this thing? So if I have an investment property, I'm thinking about selling, number one, what's my tax bill? What's the long-term capital gains? What's the recapture? Could there be estate taxes? All those questions. So now I've got a number. If that number's big, right, and I don't want to pay the tax, the next call I got to make is I got to call, Michael, I got to call you. Say, hey, here's what I'm thinking, because each 1031 I've ever done, I always think they're cut and dry and they're all straightforward. They're not, right? Each one's got nuance. It's like, well, this one, I had a partner. This one I had, there's just, we've all got things we've done in our lives that might not just fit exactly in the box. And that's where we need a pro like you to help us navigate how do we get this done. So I love this. And now we're going, so we did forward looking, we did reverse. Are there more kinds of exchanges?
Well, and that's a great segue right into our improvement exchange. And this is probably the one most investors don't know about. But if you're doing value add to a real estate project and you want to use some of your exchange funds, they're called improvement exchanges or construction exchanges.
Now, Mike, before you jump in, I want to stop you though, because I've sold a few houses in my life, some 5,000. And I've done probably over $3 billion or $4 billion in real estate sales, right, in my career. And until you showed me this, I'd never even heard of this, right? I was just hammering the forward-looking exchange. And so what I want our listeners to hear is, until you go get the expert in the space, you're operating on your beliefs and your truth. My good friend says that your truth or the truth, a lot of times it's been my truth, right? Not the truth. And so for everyone out there, realize that in the exchange world, Michael calls it the exotics. We're going to get into the exotics. This is kind of like, here we're getting into the more exotic ways you can use it. So I just want to say that this most likely, if you're a real estate investor, unless you're like the most experienced person on earth, I bet you're going to hear something you've never heard for the first time. So that's my cue for everyone to lean in a little bit, Mike, and listen to you right now.
Yeah. So we're taking the same principles in an improvement exchange. We're taking the same principles that we use in the reverse exchange. And I've got a case study here I think will best explain how we use a construction exchange along with the EAT LLC. We got to use the LLC again because I can't transfer the asset to you till it's fully improved. Okay. So just keep that in mind. And we have to have equal or greater value too, right? So we have to do the improvements to make sure that we're equal or greater value. We're using all the funds in the exchange account. So I've got a great case study here where we've got a relinquished property for $300,000 in Dallas-Fort Worth. So we're selling that on January 1st. We go and we can't find a $300,000 property we'd really like. We instead find a $200,000 wholesale property in Abilene.
And they call that, believe it, that's called A-Town. For those that don't know, I owned a bunch of properties in Abilene, Michael, which you didn't know that. And I would love to see the $200,000 house in A-Town because that must be the greatest property of our time. This thing must be 13,000 square feet. It must be on a bluff overlooking something. That's a joke because Abilene, typically the properties are lower in value. I bought a bunch of mine in Abilene in that sweet $30,000 to $50,000 range. This was a while back. So this $200,000 property must be exceptional.
And in this case, we do need some work to it. So that's how great this property is. So $200,000, it needs $100,000 in work, right? Equal or greater value. We're assuming we're selling cash here, and we are. I don't know if we've got somebody decided to start working on another house in my neighborhood. So I apologize for any background feed that you're getting here.
I think nothing. That's just an exchange. What that is that's an improvement exchange happening in real time. Mike is just showing you that they're doing the work to fulfill this agreement. That's what you're showing.
Exactly. It's the nuances of this business. So we've got a $200,000 property. We've got $100,000 left in the exchange account, right? We've got 180 days to get these repairs done. So in this case, we close on the replacement property on January. We sell the relinquished property January 1st. We take and buy the replacement property on January 15th in the EAT LLC. We've got basically 180 days to get all the repairs done. So we've got $100,000 in the account. We hire a contractor. We have till June 30th, 180 days from that closing of the relinquished property, not the replacement property. And then we take that $100,000 and we start to do improvements and pay a contractor, and we have a contractor out there. Keep in mind, and this is an important part that I kind of went over, was when we closed on the property, the replacement property for $200,000, we did it in an EAT LLC. So again, Exchangeable's going on title. I'm giving you a property management agreement. I'm giving you one more document, Brett. And that's a construction management agreement stating Brett also, not only can he collect rent and pay property taxes, but he also can manage the construction on this property because that's what you're going to do. You're going to manage contractors. So licensed, bonded, insured contractors, we're cutting them checks. And then that $100,000 comes out of the account over the course of 180 days. We have a good forward improvement exchange. We now have a property that's probably worth a lot more than $300,000, right? It's probably worth $380,000, $350,000, depending on, how deep of a discount we got on it. And so it's a great way to do value add and also improve the property in a way you don't have to do much repairs on the property after you get it. And you can use exchange funds. And so it's important, especially and Brett knows this, when you're handling rental properties, you want to get them in good condition so you can rent them out immediately and you're not being nickeled and dimed to death fixing everything. And so the improvement exchange is a really good one. So back to just the basics, equal or greater value, all the funds must be used, and you can use an EAT LLC to improve a property. And then at that point, I do the same thing, Brett. I take the LLC, I change the member from Exchangeable to Brett Tanner. Brett now has an improved property. We have a full exchange, and we've got a nice fixed up property with some value add.
So what I love about this is you've got a way to go find a distressed property, something you can add value to. Because before I didn't know that this was an option, right? I love to buy stuff that's messed up, needs work, because typically I'm buying at a discount. I do that work, right? You make all your money in real estate when you buy. And so being able to take my exchange funds, create that asset, to me is kind of the investor's dream, right? It's something that I just, again, wasn't aware of. I wasn't aware that you could use your exchange funds in a construction way to do that. So I think that's just, it's something else we need to get to. Were there any other types of exchanges before we get to how people get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, I think, Brett, there's one other I'll discuss, and I don't have a slide for it, but there is a case out of Washington called Bartell. And in the Bartell case, the Bartell family was in the business of owning drugstores. And so they wanted to do a build to suit where they built a brand new drugstore, and this thing was going to take a couple of years. And so they worked with a qualified intermediary and a QEA to hold title of the property. And that went on, as you'd imagine, years, right? Getting this new property built. Well, the IRS back then, we didn't have real guidelines for holding reverse properties. This was right before the revenue procedure came out in 2000 for a safe harbor for reverse exchanges. But in Bartell, the QI held the property for 2 years. Finally, they had it done, and then they transferred the asset. Years later, the IRS comes sniffing around, and they go, hey, wait a second. You held this property for 2 years. That's outside the safe harbor, 180 days. We're going to dispute this. And so the IRS disputed it, and the Bartell family said, we're going to go ahead and take this to the mat, right? In terms of what Brett usually says, we're going to take this to the mat. Like, we're not going to let you take our tax dollars. We feel like this was a good exchange. And they filed back and forth. Bartell wins. And that was in the Ninth Circuit, which is the western part of the United States out of the state of Washington. Arizona's in that. California's in that. I believe Nevada, maybe Utah, I think, is in the Ninth Circuit. And that became case precedent that the QI could hold the exchange property for longer than 6 months, the 180-day period. Remember we talked about the reverse, where we're holding out 180 days to sell the reverse? So there is some case law in the western part of the United States and used throughout the country, not just in the Ninth Circuit. It's used all over. That is precedent that you may be able to do a full improvement exchange. Take your construction projects longer in a reverse only, not a forward, not a construction exchange, but in a reverse and maybe a reverse improvement exchange. You could hold the property as a QI for potentially a couple of years. If you're going to use Bartell, we typically like to wrap those up in a couple of years. I know there are some QIs that take them a little bit longer, but we are comfortable in the 2-year mark. As far as we know, outside of the state of California, no other jurisdiction or the IRS has tried to dispute a Bartell style exchange to our knowledge.
Wow.
California, you watch your rear end and everything you do at California. Like, you just be as conservative as you possibly can be in California. Now, the IRS is not going to get involved in what the state of California does, right? The Franchise Tax Board has a mind of their own. They do their thing. So they may dispute it on a state level, but not on a federal level. So all that to tell you, Brett, if we're going to do a ground up improvement exchange where we're doing a lot of construction and let's say you've got an industrial piece of property and you want to improve that thing, there is a way to exchange into something like that and take it maybe longer than the 180 days on a reverse exchange. And that's the Bartell case, which I'm fascinated about. I've read everything about that case multiple times. But it is something we do here too. We do non-safe harbor reverse exchanges. So that's the only other one that maybe the audience might find fascinating.
So here's what I would say is we're wrapping up here, Mike. Number one, get with someone like you. Get with you early on in the process. Because inside of what we talked about today, we talked about there's a forward-looking 1031, there's a reverse, there's a construction, and you talked about this Bartell, but you could actually combine some of these. I could have a forward-looking exchange. It's also a part of a reverse. I'm doing one of those right now. Like, my down payment's actually like 4 or 5 houses, but then I'm going to buy the big property and then I'm going to sell the other 15 and roll it in. So what you're hearing me say, if you're listening to this and you've got a 1031, get with Michael and figure out a plan way before you think about actually realizing the plan, right? Get ahead of it very, very early. Michael, this is the best way for them to reach out to you.
Right here, my website, my phone number, my email address. It is any way that you can get a hold of me. And I think, Brett, it's important to know, like, there's a lot of people just call me and we just talk 1031, and eventually they'll turn into a client. But that first consultation is usually just I'm trying to figure out who the taxpayer is, which is the basic level, and then trying to figure out the client's goals and then trying to match them up with the right exchange, right? You were talking about using the down payment in a combo exchange. You're going to go forward, reverse, and then move off some other relinquished properties into your, into your exchange. So being able to speak, even if it's not me as the QI, whoever you're using as a QI, you should really take some time. And to Brett's point, contact them, go over everything. But this is how you get a hold of me. I would love to be of service to you. So,
all right, Mike, if you'll quit sharing your screen, I got a couple questions before we wrap up here that I want to ask you. And I play this game at dinner. Anytime I'm at a dinner with a group, you've been there when I've done this recently at one of our events. If I've got a group of smart people, I ask one question, which is, what's a purchase under $200 in the last 12 months that's most improved your life? So Michael, what's your answer?
Well, I hate to state the obvious, but this headset, regardless of whether or not we're attacking the Death Star or playing gaming, I'm not a gamer, but the talkback feature in this, Brent, I'm telling you, and it was right under.
So what's the headset? What kind of headset?
I know now you're going to call me on it. It's a Steel Series. Steel Series is the
Steel Series headset. Okay.
Nowadays we're on Zoom all the time, so I have to have, and this has a talkback feature, which you can hear your own voice, which is kind of weird for some people. But before I was doing a lot of Zooms, I had headphones on, and it muffled my ability to hear myself. And for whatever egotistical way, I want to kind of hear what I sound like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so probably the best investment that I've had in the last year, and I'm not joking. This is being on this thing all day.
I love that one. And then my last question before we break is, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self and you give yourself one message, what's the message you would tell your 20-year-old self?
The message, two things: get a written budget and follow it religiously. And don't buy and finance cars. The little Ramsey thing. If you are a young person and you go out and buy your car and buy your house, you are behind the eight ball. You are so far behind the eight ball. And they say, I think 72% of people live paycheck to paycheck. Can you imagine what that's like? We're in the richest country in the world with the most wealth, and we're giving all of our money away. 72% of Americans cannot miss a paycheck. Wow, right? The stress that does to our body. And so if I was going back to my 20-year-old self, that's what I tell myself is, and I've been in a situation where I haven't had money, and I have had money, and like there's this feeling of not worrying about whether or not you're going to pay your bills this month. Like, it's not something that ever crosses my mind anymore, but I've been there and I understand the stress that causes. But the other thing is, you're not able to take advantage of the opportunities if you don't have some cash. When the tariff thing hit, I'm buying. When COVID hit, I'm buying. If the real estate market, if I had been smart back then, I would have been buying like crazy $30,000 properties, but I wasn't in a position to take advantage of the opportunities, because the opportunities will come in this country in a lot of different varieties. But if you're not set up to take advantage of those, and that's when you really win. That's when your wealth just goes through the roof, is when you're able to take advantage of those. So that's what I would give my advice is, like, start saving and having some cash. And it's amazing how quickly, some diligence will do. And that's what 72% of Americans don't want to do. We don't want to do it. What a
great answer would be to quit financing luxury, live off a budget. And I'll tell you, a really, really wealthy guy once told me, he said, Brett, the same opportunities come to everybody. The difference is only a few are in a position to take advantage of them when they come.
Yes.
And when it comes for you, be ready to take advantage of it. Michael, You're a world-class human. I love the headset. You look like you're going to go. I'm going to let you get back to Fortnite or whatever you're doing. If you guys got questions, reach out to Michael on 1031 Exchanges.
I mean,
And what I did though, that was just to really anchor in the theme, which is at Be Wealthy, we want to help you be better. I hope you learned a ton about 1031 exchanges. See us back here for the next episode where we show you how to make more money and what to do with it. I'm Brett Tanner at Be Wealthy. See you next time.